Okay, so yeah, today we're going to talk about some of the new features that were released when React 16 came out. Let me get my notes up, or scroll to the right part of my notes. So the newest version of React, or the newest major version of React, React 16, came out at the end of September. It was a complete rewrite of the library. So the core architecture is now built around something that was codenamed Fiber. So it was called Fiber. There was even a website, is Fiber ready yet, I think? And it was showing the kind of the status progress of where they were at. It was just keeping up with the tests. So React 15 had tests, React 16 had to pass all those tests. So it was literally just a percentage showing how many of those tests had passed and failed with the latest build, which was kind of fun to watch. The main API, though, was maintained, so backwards compatibility should be no problem. There are some small breaking changes that the team said are very edge and specific use cases. So they're more of the, definitely on the really uncommon end of things. So if you have a project or you were writing a project in 15 and you want to upgrade to 16, go for it. It shouldn't break anything. With that as well, I lost my train of thought. If you're using Create React App for your final project, that's going to install 16 for you by default. So as you're working on those projects, that you're going to have these features available to you. And yeah, let's start looking at some of the things. This one. So I'm going to be sharing some code in CodePen, or using CodePen to display some of this code. It's a neat little tool to use that's out there, especially for stuff like this, because you don't have to worry about installing React or anything. Literally, settings, you can go JavaScript. If you use this quick add, they don't have 16 in here by default. So I just went to cdn.js, which is .com, which is a library and things like that. CDN, and just typed in React, and then copied over React and React DOM into here, and now we have React available to us. I put a Babel preprocessor on here. I don't think it's needed, but I just kind of threw it on there because it's available. So the first thing that is new and is also very nice is error handling. I'm going to open up chat window too, so just in case you want to throw anything out there, I'll see it. So before version 16, a JavaScript error inside a component would break the entire app. So literally nothing would render. There'd be a bunch of errors in the console and we'd see those, but for a user, it would just look like nothing's there. So here we have some code. We've built a component, and then we have our app class component, and we set up a button that will update the state, and that's gonna change this profile name to use that new updated name. However, we set this up intentionally to break in this instance. So we're saying, user is going to be null when we update the user. So when we click the update button, this update user is fired. So update user is changing the state to null. So the state is going to change to null. And then when that tries to render, we're going to get errors. So this is how React used to work. Click update and it breaks. The entire thing breaks. So let's see if I type error. Props.user is null. It's trying to get some info from null, and that's causing errors. So yeah, that's not what we want. Like when we want things, when things break or act weird, we don't want them to just completely go blank. The entire component tree fails. So this is obviously not the best case because the user would go, what?
And there were little workarounds for this in the past, but they were kind of a pain. You had to put some ifs and elses and look for things in your state. So, there's times where if I did something like this, I would have to call like if, whatchamacallit, it would have to be like if this, or if this dot state dot name type of thing, to make sure that it comes back true, then do this, otherwise, show an error. And it was very cumbersome. There were ways around it, but they weren't, it was a consistent problem. So what React 16 introduces and provides a built-in solution now is a new lifecycle method called component did catch. So this lifecycle hook gets triggered whenever a component's render function throws an error. So let's implement that. If I can find my reference. There we go. So component didn't catch lifecycle method inside of our class. And we can do this set state. And then we'll update our state with current state has error. Sure. And we can add that has error, which will be false by default. Now in our render, here we'll do if this.state that has error, so we know something went wrong. We can return a div else. Okay, so now we have this lifecycle method, component did catch, and that's going to, before we break everything, it's going to, this is going to try and render, because by default this is going to be false, and it's going to break. It's going to say, oh no, something broke. It's going to send the fact that something broke to component did catch. Component did catch is going to update our state, set the error to true, and then on that render, it's going to re-render it, and this is going to come back. Sorry, something went wrong. So this is all correct, and it should be. Sorry, something went wrong. So now when it breaks, we can show an error message. Component did catch also does take two arguments, info and error. If I'm remembering correctly, and you can see get more info on or get the actual error, but this is useful for error reporting. If you have software built into your system that uses that, but send error to reporting type thing. So we don't have any of that because this is an example, so I'm just going to leave it out for now, but know that it does do a couple other things which are useful in production applications. So now with this functionality, there's also a new concept that's introduced, which is an error boundary. So doing this component did catch inside of every single component would get very tedious. It wouldn't be, it wouldn't be dry. It would be something that, we're writing the same code over and over again. So error boundaries are wrapper components that use component did catch to capture errors anywhere in the child component tree. So also because of how the component tree is structured, you don't want to use component did catch everywhere. You want it to be more specific use cases, or maybe just over encompassing, all encompassing, because it's going to look through the entire tree. So if anything goes wrong, there might be some things where, if this doesn't render, I don't want to throw an error and break everything, or, not break everything, but display an error because, one little thing that's non-consequential broke for some reason on a page, one component out of 20 or something. So choosing where to use it is also very important. But this error boundary makes things much more useful. So let's implement the error boundary here. Error 3 extends that, and then I'm going to copy these in here and edit them a little bit. So since we're just dealing with the error, we can get rid of this. We still have our component did catch. And then let's get our render. Actually, need the render too. Okay. Render if this state has error, return, else return this.props.children. And then one close, two close. So now in our app, we can remove this. We're not going to deal with the error in our actual app component. Remove this, component did catch, left cycle. We can also get rid of this if here. And with that. All right. I don't know how to unindent on Cloud9. Or CodePen, sorry. Okay, so now we can just put this error boundary here. Like this. So this is looking at, return the child components, or if, everything comes back right. Yeah, that should all be exactly what we're looking for. So this should work just like it did before when we had this catch component did catch inside of the app component. So let's double check that. Yes. So what this allows us is also the flexibility of where do we want the error boundary to be? Like right now we see, oh, something went wrong. Like we could make this, something like, please try again. And then, oh, well, let me click update again, type of thing. Or if we want to move the boundary, we can put it around that button, and then it's gone. So when there's an error in the render of any of the children components, it's going to be passed up to this error boundary. So that's kind of where I was saying, knowing where to use this is going to be something that I think takes some time and some practice because it is a new thing.
So the app.js is a child component of, it's like lower in the hierarchy than the error boundary one, because it's kind of confusing how, like, I would think like both of those components would render or something like that. Like,
I'm not sure.
I guess I'm having trouble understanding like how you can have the app component with the error boundary in it, and then the error boundary component that kind of like references the app component too. I guess it's kind of, I don't know.
Okay, are you just saying in the structure of my, like, this file?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I know this is set up a little bit differently than, you know, most would be. Let me see. Sorry, my audio is doing weird things right now. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh no, I don't think the mic is going there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to assume that you can still hear me. But this is just a file that's set up a little bit differently. You can put all of your React components into one file if you want to. It's not recommended because that's kind of, you know, you want to have those JavaScript modules that you import into your other components and only use what's needed where. But this is just how I set this one up for this example, because one of the limits of CodePen is that you only get one JS file, one CSS file, one HTML file. In this setting, I could set up, you know, the whole project structure if I wanted, but just chose not to, simplicity. But yeah, we're calling this error boundary. It's just available because we've defined it. So it's there, and then we're using it here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So like I'm just being an idiot. I think the app component and the error boundary component aren't going to render individually. The error boundary component is just going to be the one that renders, and the app component is just going to sit like it'll be in the file tree, but it's not going to be. It's not going to be imported.
It's moving along, but if it doesn't, let me know, because I think it's just the structure of the file and how I'm writing it a little bit differently because of this example, as opposed to, you know, this could, you know, we could have an error boundary.js file and we could import it up here at the top of the file if we wanted to, and that would be the more logical structure. It's just not within I can't do that within limitations of CodePen.
I see what you're saying. The app is just, the app itself is not going to render. The only way the app will access the app is through the error.
So something else that React 16 introduced is you no longer require a render method to return a single React element, which is something that I think people have been wanting for a long time. So we're now able to render multiple sibling elements without wrapping an element in anything. So like these divs are no longer needed in React 16. You see, it used to break. Well, I guess this is still one. It should still work. Oh, why is it telling me that? Okay. Let's move to the other example that I have. I might be messing this up somewhere in here, but let's wipe this and look at something a little bit simpler. Okay. So let's just say we have a list. We're also able to return arrays, strings, and numbers now, which this is going into as well. So we have all right, 1, 2, 3, Joel, James. All right, turn, let's put that there. Update this. Okay, so there's our list. So since we're returning an array, we have to give each element a unique key prop. Otherwise, React will still display a warning, and it's not going to know which one's which. However, we can also render this list of items inside the UL of another component alongside other items. And React is going to merge them inside the same list, which is really neat. Like this. We have our JS teachers, and teachers return. We have our unordered list. Perfect. All right. And Ben. And now let's render this component. Teachers. Unexpected token. Return. Oh, return's wrong. Okay, so there's our list. And the coolest part is, I guess this is not the best way to look at this. See if I can get to this. Here we go. You see in here, they're just slipped in there as list items. It's pretty neat. So, and that's what it is. You can return multiple sibling components via an array, not just by themselves, which is still something that is a lot cleaner than what we used to have. So let's show another example. Which is not going to render because I don't have these components, but something that we could do. So we could have a header component. And our main component. And our, let's say, footer component. And we obviously render app. So this is obviously cleaner than what we used to have to do. So we used to have to render or return with a div in here, which we then close. And then inside of this div, we put our components. If I can get this straight. And we had to do that on every React component. So we had divs and spans all over the place in our HTML, which just got messy. So we no longer need to do that now, which is very nice. We can render siblings in an array, just like this. It's a lot cleaner, it's a lot nicer. React 16 also introduced returning strings or numbers from a render method. So you can do things like this now. And there it is, hello. Or "2018, Happy New Year." And that pops up and is rendered. So to overview that, we can now render arrays, strings, and numbers from our return. And the array can be a list of components. So we don't have to wrap them in a div. Something else that is new in React 16 is it allows custom DOM attributes. So before React 16, any unrecognized attribute given to an element would be ignored by React. So if we had something, div my attribute is the best, and then something in here, that would be ignored. Now, any standard or custom attribute will end up in the DOM. So we could provide this, and and it'll be available to us now. My attribute is the best. React will pass the attributes through to the DOM. So even though all attributes get rendered to the DOM now, we should still be using the canonical React naming for known attributes. So if we do something like class equals, let's just say header. React is still going to give us a warning about that. And say that, we should be using class name, not class. So those same things apply still, and we're still going to get those warnings, but that class would be passed through now to that div element. Another new feature of React 16 is that we can now return null from our set state. So let's write some code to, let's say, get book. So, and the thought process is, if state gets updated in set state, well, now we can decide if state gets updated in set state to prevent unnecessary updates. So we're looking at performance here. So let's say new book title, this dot set state state if state dot title equals new title. We can do this now. And then we can say else return title. And there and there. So what we're doing here is we're checking if the new value of the state is the same as the existing one. And then if the values are the same, we're going to return null and the component won't be re-rendered. And then if they're different, the component will re-render with the new state. So saving renders is nice for specific instance cases. If we're finding that we have a problem with that, then this is a way that we can attack that now. Two more things to talk about. So this one is portals. Portals are still a little bit abstract to me, but we'll go through them and show them off. And I think we can all see where they're valuable. So yeah, React 16 introduced inserting a child element into a different location in the DOM. So outside of the main DOM tree with portals. So typically, as like I'll have right here, if I can open this up. There we go. Yeah. So typically in our HTML and our index.html, we'll have a div with an ID of root, and then everything just is being rendered to that root, like I have right here in our React code. However, now with portals, we can have a second one. That we can render to. So we can render specific parts of our component tree inside of this sibling div. And that's coming from a new function called create portal. It's just going to look like this in our return. Oh, I actually don't need that, but we're going to have a React DOM, and then we're going to use create portal instead of render. And this one, actually let me make this a full component so we can actually render it. Let's say class portal extends component. All right. And then return. Actually, there, that'll be much simpler. All right, create portal. Then from here, it takes two arguments, the child and the container. Actually, let's do, see if this works. And then the container. So we'll be targeting that second div that we made. Oh, yeah, there it is. Hello from inside the portal. And then we inspect this. we see where it is in the DOM. So it's in this portal, even though we're rendering it on the root. So the first element, or the first argument, sorry, child. So if you see create element in documentation, it's going to look, this is going to keep refreshing, so I'm going to close it. But it's going to look, you know, like, or sorry, create portal, child, container. That's how you're going to see it referenced. So the first argument is the child, is the content that we want to render. And the second argument, container, is the DOM element where the content is going to render, as I think we're seeing here pretty clearly. So if you can read through the React docs a little bit deeper about why this was implemented. However, the docs mention that they're useful for when a parent component has an overflow of hidden or a style on their Z index. So if we need the child to visually, quote unquote, break out of its container, one of the more, probably what's going to be used a lot for is modals. So, you know, creating a modal window that, you know, pops out. And since, okay, let's call this modal. And let's say, instead of doing this, we just, you know, say, let's just call it children. Okay, so modal is always going to return via create portal. And because of that, we can place it anywhere in our app and it'll always render inside of that div that we created, that my portal div. So if we had something like return, let's say we have a div. Close that div, and then spacing is off. All right, and then let's say we have a header. And that header, you know, says welcome, and then get rid of our header or close our header. Modal. So we can put whatever we want. You know, this could be our content in here. Backslash. And then star slash. And now this will always render inside, this modal's content will always render inside of that my portal div. The last thing I want to mention is that if you were paying attention to the React world over the summer, you probably heard a lot about companies switching away from React because of the BSD license clause that Facebook had on the React library. It was a BSD plus patents license that concerned many developers, startups, companies, people using React. But with the release of React 16, React is now licensed as MIT. So it's under the MIT license, makes it more flexible, makes sure that, you know, people aren't worried about use cases, the weird legal times that might come into play. it was more legalese than I really understood, but it seemed like, people were jumping ship from React. I know Automatic, who makes WordPress or owns WordPress, I guess. They're rewriting some part of their app, their backend admin panel, and they were using React, and they said they were ditching it. So some big companies were getting rid of React because of the BSD plus patents license. So now that's no longer an issue. They also extended the MIT license to 15.6.2 and later. 15.6.1, I believe, was what was out when React 16 was released. So they post an update to React 15. I think, well, I haven't looked at the release notes, but that was specifically for updating the license to MIT, was one of the main causes of that. So if you're ever in a position where, somebody's worried about that, you'll know that, it might not be feasible to move the code base to React 16, but if you're on 15, then moving it to 15.6.2 or later. I don't know how many major minor build bug releases. I can't ever remember my semantic versioning, major, minor, and then the third number of React are going to be released, but patches, major, minor patches. That's always available there as well. So to recap, we went over React 16 introducing error handling, introducing the fact that we can render arrays, and our arrays, the rendered array can now have sibling components. We don't have to have these wrapping divs anymore. We can also render strings and numbers from our inside our React components. We can pass through custom DOM attributes now. We can also return null from set state when needed. And then we have these portals now, which are really interesting, that I'm sure people are going to do cool things with. The first of which is using it for modals, like our example. That's a very straightforward use case, but I'm sure there's going to be some interesting things, and there probably are some interesting things already using it. And then lastly, we talked about React now being released under the MIT license. So nobody has to worry about any of the BSD plus patents that Facebook had in there before. Questions, comments? Anything you want to look at more? Fine.